To start today's lecture, which is the 12th lecture, I want to thank Jose Luis Ambeta, Ambita for straightening me out about an issue. And the issue was, he pointed out that I had made this sort of zero sum was the term he used, assertion. And it turned out he was right. So I just want to clear up what I said and what I should have said. Okay. So I asserted something like a society will always use its value cultural preens to make its members resistant to believing cultural preens from of another society. Okay. The following is closer to what I should have said. A society can use its value cultural preens to make its members resistant to believing some of the cultural preens of another society. Okay, so just wanted to clear that up. Thanks, Jose Luis. Now we're going to turn to we're going to go back to the chapter, the brain, or the human brain, I think it was. So the human brain stores preens in memory devices in the human brain, even though we're not quite sure how those memory devices work. And all of the preens that are stored in a person's brains are now called, following Dawkins, that person's meme set. Okay. And all right, so to continue.
Another important subset of a person's meme set is what I call the experiential meme set. Roughly, these are the memes a person acquires from the environment, typically through their senses. These are a person's memories, the first serious injury, the first meeting with a future mate, CDTD, how the brain captures memes.
Okay, so like many philosophers have said, they usually would term it, we can learn from experience, or we experience the world through our senses. And I call those things we pick up through our senses and store in our brains experiential memes. And so among your memes are an experiential subset, experiential meme set.
There is also a subset of a person's meme set that the person creates themselves. Your genetic preens, for their own survival, have designed people's brains to be obligatory meme processors. We are constantly using our brains to process our existing memes and create new ones. The Hamlet soliloquy preen did not exist until Shakespeare processed his existing memes and created it in his brain. We will call this subset of a person's meme set the person's created meme set.
Okay, I want to discuss this. Do you guys agree that that happens? That we all by ourselves will think about our memes and create new ones? Anybody wish to engage me in discussion of this? How many disagree with that? Okay, it seems pretty obvious. Now, why is it that humans have this ability? For example, bees and bacteria wouldn't have it. Okay. Why is it that we can take our existing memes and munge them around in our heads and create what are sometimes called syntheses or whatever you want to Why do we have that ability? Well, it's the genetic preens that gave us that ability. It could have designed our brains any number of ways, but they would only, I think maybe this isn't the right way to say it, give us the ability to create memes if it helped the genetic preens to survive. Yes. So the question is, how does our ability to do this creation of memes from existing ones help the genetic preens survive?
Like it helps us avoid threats.
Elizabeth, I missed a word, please, again.
Like it helps us avoid threats from our
Isabel,
experience. Like,
can you give me an example?
so if we like run into like catastrophic events, touching hot stove or something, and if we just, remember that in our lifetime, then maybe we can learn from it and avoid similar kinds of threats and maybe also extrapolate from that threat.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's right. When you put your hand on the stove, everybody thinks you learn an important lesson. And the lesson is don't put your hand on the stove, right? And so how does that happen? So you put your hand on the stove and you acquire experiential memes. And those include a lot of stuff that you acquire. You obviously acquire the meme we usually refer to as painful, but you also recognize you sort of turn on the what I call the meme recorder, and you start to record things. And so if you put your hand on the stove, you don't walk away just knowing that this pain has occurred. You also walk away knowing, well, it occurred in the kitchen, and I was doing this and that. Okay. And I remember there was a boiling pot on the stove at the time I reached up. You remember more than just that, gee, something painful has occurred. Yes. And so after the fact, you've got this now all recorded as memes. And once you record it as memes, you go back through it because this is a process that apparently your brain has been programmed to do. And what do you come up with? You create new memes that you're going to store in your head. And among them are, don't put your hands on stoves. Okay. All right. And does that kind of thing help the genes to survive?
Like if we
Yes.
get to live, yeah.
Well, burning your hand on a stove is unlikely to kill you. On the other hand, if you don't create new memes that affect your future behavior, then you're probably going to do it a lot of times, and maybe eventually you'll kill yourself, right? But it's obvious that the genes would prefer that you don't repeatedly burn your hand on the stove. Yes, you get this? So I want to go through the process. One is that certain experiences flick on your brain's meme recorder. And it records a lot of stuff about that experience. And that stuff is later processed to create new memes, which then impact your behavior, future behavior. Yes, that's the process. And there's a whole lot to be said about it. And maybe maybe we'll do a detour about this. So maybe we'll save it for another day. But in DTD, uh, I provide an example which involves my showing up at your door and knocking. And when you open the door, I let a lion go. So that should be fun. And as I say in that part, I'll bet you'll never forget that day. Okay. So, and of course, you can't
Professor.
afford it. Yes, Nathan.
This is Nathan speaking. I actually was thinking on a kind of a different track where it's like the idea of we kind of idolize great thinkers, right? So having these kind of creative, I completely understand your point about like the creative preens help the genetic preens survive by keeping you alive. But I was
Yes.
thinking, like you can have like a group of people who um, idolize and then proceed to like basically wish to mate with like great thinkers, right? My guess is that a person would rather be a mate with Leonardo da Vinci than the guy in his house, and this is his neighbor. And so the idea is like creating preens might help the genetic preens reproduce.
You created preens might help what?
Created means might help the genetic preens survive by reproduction.
Oh,
But
okay.
that
Now I
would
get,
that would rely on like value or cultural preens, right? Because that's only true if we actually value those preens.
yes,
Right.
you're both of you are raising good points, and it happens to be the next thing I want to talk about. But before I do it, I will make a note. Hmm, detour to lions. Because I think that'd be A, fun, and B, it's an important point. Okay. So now let us see, let us see. Okay. Now we're going to get to what Nathan Johnson brought up and uh, which Ian, I think it was that. Anyway, we'll get there.
Many of the cultural preens of modern societies began as created memes in a single person's brain. For example, many Christian cultural preens began in Jesus's brain. Many cultural preens of Western societies began in John Locke's, and many in communist societies began in Karl Marx's. We could add Einstein, Newton, Muhammad, and others to this list. So, were these people geniuses? Had they discovered great truths?
So this is what Nathan Johnson and Ryan Rubel um, were talking about. So that's the question, and I want to continue that discussion. Um, were these people geniuses? Had they discovered great truths? What's your
Like
opinion? Oh,
this
okay.
is my 2 cents. But I think one view we could take is that one, they're not geniuses. If you kind of take the idea that like every preen slowly mutates, deliberately
Okay.
or non-deliberately.
Okay.
Um, they have to be standing on the shoulders of giants to develop these ideas. And by extension, these great truths are kind of just things that we hold, the cultural preens hold to be great truths as opposed to some sort of universal fact.
Well, yeah, uh, you sort of mixed a few things in there, Nathan. So, uh, yes, but for example, I mean, okay, here's my answer. which I think is what Ryan was also saying. Okay, yes, I like this way of posing it. What would Preen theory say about whether these people are great geniuses, have discovered great truths, etc.? What would Preen theory say?
Doesn't matter.
Whoops.
John?
Sorry, Ryan. I think Preen theory would say it doesn't really matter if they are
Well,
genius.
no, I don't think Preen theory would necessarily say it doesn't really matter whether you are. It would, I think, lead us to a more definitive statement about whether they're geniuses.
I was going to sort of reiterate my previous point, which was
Yes.
that their created preens probably aligned very closely with the value cultural preens of the societies they were part of.
Yes. So that's also my answer. Okay. So I'll read my answer, which is related, of course, to this.
Preen theory, each of the thinkers began with a basic human brain and operating system and acquired many means after they were born. These means were processed, and new created means were generated. Some of these created means went viral. They became geniuses and had found truths, only when some society used its value preens to provide them with these qualities.
Okay. So you may revere whoever you revere. And certainly, if I take off my Preen theory hat, I'm a great admirer of Gauss, for example. But I'm just that because I happen to be a mathematician, right? And he's, arguably the best that ever was. Okay, within the context of the mathematical society. So yes, if I'm wearing my mathematician hat, I think he's a genius. But when I put on my Preen theory hat, I have to sort of, I can't go with that that idea that he's a genius because Preen theory is a scientific theory, and I have no clue as to what genius really means. So, I mean, I do when I'm not wearing my Preen hat, things look different. But when I'm wearing my Preen hat, no geniuses, no, truths have been revealed. Preen theory is just describing the process by which things happen. And this is what Preen theory says has happened. Okay? So, okay, John, yes.
So just to be clear, we're saying that what it means to be a genius is dependent on the context of the value cultural preens within a society, right?
Well,
So
I'm not sure. Yes, genius is a value. It's not good or bad, but when we talked about value cultural preens, one can extend the way we use that. I describe it as putting good labels and bad labels onto various things, but we can extend that. And we can say that value cultural preens are putting labels on things. So, for example, I'm able to look at mathematicians and put labels on them. Okay. Genius, not a genius. Genius, not a genius, right? Gauss gets one, a genius one. Euler gets one, right? Those guys I've learned to put it on them. Okay. The same thing is correct about truth, and we're shortly going to look at how that's the case. What makes something true is just society putting stickers. It's telling you the criteria for putting a true sticker on things and a criteria for putting, I use sticker label. Sorry, I mixed those. Okay, on other things. Yes? So that's the point of view. So when I talk about maybe value cultural creeds, it's really a big set of things that are done similarly. And let me also explain that, for example, even notions of beautiful and not beautiful,
Right.
right? Because, you know, what was beautiful 30 years ago can be not beautiful. These things change, right? Because they're part of cultures, they get mutated and they go away and come back, and all these things. These things change with time. And so the set of stickers that I have because of when I grew up, you know, the values that I was taught and where to put these stickers is going to be different than the values you've been taught. Blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot here, right?
Right. Yeah, I sorry, just to follow up on that, I was thinking if maybe the category of, you know, opinions or subjective dreams would be a useful subcategory of the created meme set.
No,
Because
I don't think. I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
no, sorry, because it seems like it would capture this labeling, this generic labeling, right? Not only good and bad, but maybe genius and not genius, beautiful and not beautiful.
True and not true. But uh, what I don't agree with in what you said is that that has something to do with with created preens. Created preens are created preens, and uh, and we understand how they get created. Yes, but the values we put on those created preens, or the values we put on the creators of those created preens, those are just in this large genetic class, of this large cultural preen class, which we do need a good name for, but for right now, I could call them label cultural preens. You know, there's probably a better term, but yes.
Yes. So, sorry, just so these are so the something like value cultural preens is an attribute of society or some larger group of people, while created memes are only within the individual.
Yes, that's one thing that distinguishes them
Okay.
from each other. But for example, it needn't have anything to do with individuals. Let's go back to here's a good thing. Let's look at music. And in particular, I'm going to look at classical music. Okay. Could look at any music, but let's look at classical music. All right. So if you are a member of the classical music culture, okay, then that culture has people with more or less mutational power, like all societies. And among those that have the most mutational power are like professors in music schools. Yes, they have a lot of mutational power. Critics who can publish in the New York Times or Okay. Great composers acquire a lot of, right? Okay. And so within that culture has arisen various label cultural prints. And those are used by members of that culture to put good music on some things, bad music on others, right? Okay. But of course, like all cultures, these cultural preens, including the label cultural preens, are subject to mutation and change with time. Yes? Okay. So that leads us to the following situation. If we look at what the musical elite have given us labels for what's good and bad in classical music, they may certainly find that atonal music, which was once the vogue, was that Schopenhauer and people like that, I think. No, wait, not Schopenhauer. Schoenberg? Schoenberg. Anyway, okay. Now, that's to some extent, since that time, they have mutated a little bit. But that's where you put good and bad. All right. Now, if you're not a member of that society, you're just some guy walking around who happens to like classical music, like moi, okay, then if you bring in those elite people, from the academic, let's call it cultural society, they will put bad on a lot of the things I really like. Okay. And they will put good on a lot of things that I can't bear to listen to. All right. So that's why that's how that works, right? And the same thing happens when you go to a museum to look at modern art. Okay. You see a painting that's entirely black. That's what it is. Or you see something where the normal statement is, my 3-year-old kid could do better than that, right? That's because the people at the museums and the academic and critical, let's call it the academic art world, has developed its own label. And that's what you see in art museums. Now, don't get me wrong. I happen to like a lot of, music that many people don't like. You'll evolve your own aesthetic. I happen to like some modern art and stuff like that. But the reason it's in that museum is most likely because it meets the aesthetic of the academic art culture, society. All right. Oh, Isabella. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, that kind of reminded me of like I like there's this like book that I read slash like, it became like a TED Talk, but yeah, apparently like the way we think about genius has like shifted. So like instead of like it's like actually like a very Germanic idea to like label a person as a particular genius. But in the ancient times, it used to be that genius is like a thing that visits you, and like you are like a manifestation of like that visit. rather than like you as a person is a genius. So like I don't know, Preen theory kind of reminded me of that. Like rather
Yeah.
than like labeling something, it's like consequences of a lot of like dynamical systems, like almost like so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen this idea where, for example, you know, I am just a vessel through which truth is flowing, and I present it to you, right? So I think it's that kind of thing. And yes, you can think that that's what people are, and they're not geniuses, but genius is coming from just through them. Uh, sure, there's lots of ways to think about this, but there's also the Preen theory way to think about this, and that's what we've just talked about. Yes?
Yeah, it seems like somewhat sort of maybe parallel because like it's like a bunch of influences that like you have no control over, but you somehow like get to participate in. Like, yeah.
But it's the question of where is this stuff coming from that's flowing through you?
Mhm.
And ultimately, I think Preen theory is saying it's just part of the physical processes of the world. You know, it ultimately can be described from physics, but it can also be described as you have this computer in your head and it munges around the stuff that's available and it creates new data. And, and societies may declare that you are the vessel for great truths. But where do those great truths ultimately come from? I think in most places where I've seen this kind of vessel idea, there's this notion, whether it's articulated or not, that it's coming from, God, or it's coming from, some muse or some otherworldly thing. And Preen theory is saying, no, it's just what happens when you got a lot of energy running around and you got computers doing things. Okay. That may be the difference. Okay, John.
Sorry, I don't mean to hog that time, but
That's okay.
I think Ryan wrote a great example on the chat, which was saying to look at how Galileo's ideas were received over time, right? And the society
Yeah.
defined what was seen as true, and that changed over time, right? So people's opinion of him also changed over time. So I thought that was a really good example. And
Yeah.
I just like to ask how to, because I want to be precise in using the Preen theory terms. So when Galileo put forth his ideas,
Yes.
he disagreed with society as to what was true and what was not true, right?
Well, just to be precise, it's not so much that he didn't agree with, it's that religious society, and he's Italian, and that's where the
Right.
Pope is. Religious society had cultural creeds, which Galileo's created memes were antithetical to.
Perfect. Does
Yeah.
that mean that Galileo, if he believes his created meme set, does that mean that he doesn't belong to that society, which has cultural creeds that are antithetical to his own beliefs?
Well, wait a minute. So say that part again, please, John.
I was gonna, so my question is if this necessarily means that Galileo is not a member of the Catholic society in the lens of Preen theory. Once he has these antithetical ideas, does that mean he's not a member of that society?
No, I don't think it does, because, for example, there may be a new law passed on, tomorrow on what ingredients are allowed in paint. Okay. I might run a paint company and say, I don't like that law. It doesn't mean I'm not a member of the society anymore. It just means that, yes, some of the important cultural preens are not ones that I like. I would prefer they weren't there. I don't think it means anything quite so profound as you're no longer a member of society. Now, in the case of Galileo, I think that the view I prefer is that Galileo put out these created things, created memes. And the society said, these are terrible cultural preens. And as I recall, uh, uh, they invited Galileo to, admit his mistake and, go quietly away. As I also recall, and I don't recall it well, there was the implicit threat that if he didn't do that, he would suffer. And wasn't he put under house arrest and stuff, basically?
I'm not sure. I think he said, and yet it moves, right?
Yes, he did say something like that. You're right. And yes, there was something like that. And of course, what he was saying was really antithetical to the Catholic Church's view, right? Because from the Catholic Church's point of view, and they had also adopted this formally, I don't think you find it in the Bible, the earth was at the center of everything, right?
Yeah.
That's where it was happening. And, if that wasn't true, they had a lot of cleaning up to do. So, one option was, you didn't really mean it, did you, Galileo? No, I must have been hit in the head or, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the process as I see it, but you may have
Okay. Makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
Created memes are the reason I think of the human brain as the crucible of societal evolution.
So that's just a sort of informal statement, right? But that's the way I think about it. That societal evolution, and I haven't put the pieces of this together, but when Karl Marx publishes his created memes, they seem to have caused a lot of societal evolution. Yes, for example, the 1918, was it 1918? Yeah, Russian Revolution. Yes. And, when John Locke says that we have an inherent right, basically, to life, liberty, and I don't know, maybe it's property or something. And he says that those who govern should govern with the consent of the people. That leads to a lot of changes in society's cultural preens, including, for example, much of the US cultural preens. Yes? Okay. So so it's an informal statement that I think of the human brain as the crucible of societal evolution, but that's what I intended to capture. Okay, Nathan, They're
So
hockey.
I was wondering, I was thinking, what if like people like John Locke or Karl Marx, like for sure they have mutational power, but like what if the reason that certain societies think of them as a genius is just because like their meme set happened to align with a future societal preen set. And like we put a spotlight on them just because they got lucky almost.
Yeah, I like your question in a sort of general way. I don't think they, I think, well, okay, how is it that once John Locke says this stuff, and there are others who do this as well, John Mills and everything, but we suddenly get these new societies where, which we, I guess, roughly democracies, where governed by consent of the governed. Okay, why did that happen? So that's a good question. Why did we go from those ideas to this other one? What was it? What was the process? Because really, game theory is about the process by which these things happen. So what was that process? Now, I assume that John Locke was probably had a lot of mutational power within what I'll just call the academic society of England at the time. He's a late 1600s guy, I think. Yes. Okay, so I'll assume he had some such power because, for example, apparently he got his books published and stuff. That requires some power. Okay, and one view or one thought I have is, well, like lots of other people, um, he 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 seeks uh, the rewards of fame, praise, and everything else, and I'll get more of that if he can get his stuff to go viral. I don't know, I'm mumbling now, and you guys may have mumbles too. So there is a good question. Okay, and remember, you guys have these term papers. Yes. So how is it that John Locke is sitting there and he has these created preens, and we end up with democracies like the United States? Yes. How does that happen? And I think it's just the process described in preen theory uh, that tells us how it happens, but I don't know the actual details in this case at all. I mean, it wasn't like democracies were around. I mean, they had been around, it's true. Anyway, I don't know how to put all this together, but Julian Glover does. Julian?
Well, I don't know if I do for sure, but I have an idea. And
Okay.
one interesting point is that the US was kind of lucky in its founding in that there was a military, but also this sort of kind of like crew of philosophers separate from the
Yes.
military
Mhm.
that created the rules as well as the kind of like the preens or the morals of the country. Like Thomas Jefferson was not part of,
Absolutely.
the Continental Army. And Thomas Jefferson, yeah, he was a politician, but more so he was really just kind of a philosopher that read a lot of books. Same thing with like Ben Franklin,
Yes.
Madison. So these guys were very well read. They read Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Rousseau, all them. And they
Yes.
mashed all these ideas and said, hey, you know what? These guys are right. And maybe we can try to make a country that believes in these individual rights. And whereas other countries are either made through like referendums, like maybe Australia or Canada, or more so military intervention, like the French republics or the
Yeah.
Communist Revolution, things like that. And those tend to be more against the idea of individual liberties.
Yeah. Once again, I appreciate your historical knowledge to throw into this. Yeah. So it's a good point. To focus on Jefferson, um, he, yes, also have a sense that he was sort of a member, displaced by 100 years, of the same sort of academic, philosophical Enlightenment thing that was happening. And by the time Jefferson is born, I guess, already one of the leading figures of that time. Perhaps he's dead at this time, but his documents have already been anointed with the label very important, right? And it may be that all of the philosophical, intellectual founders of America were just members of that. Like, for example, you guys who are computer scientists are anointed with the idea uh, that the MPP question is an important one. You can hardly, end up getting a PhD in computer science and not know that. So it's one of the basic enduring cultural preens of that philosophical society at that time. So yeah, I think you may be right. It's just they all read it, the founders, and they thought it was great because their societies told them it was great. Okay, I get it. Yeah, I like it. Thanks, Julian. Okay, Nathan Derhaki.
Yes, I was, I guess, kind of answering your question on how did Locke's mutational power or what he said result in a more democratic society. I think that he obviously did have an impact, but I think there is like the larger factor is just like that was kind of like the trend, and it's almost like bigger than any one person, just like that's where history was going, and perhaps Locke just saw that before anyone else.
It's
My
possible. It's possible. Yes, that it was what's sometimes called the zeitgeist, that it was in the air, and that Locke may have just, recorded his views of it or consolidate a bunch of those things that were in the air. It's certainly possible, but I don't know what actually happened, uh, and the important thing for this course is whatever happened, I don't think it's going to transcend our basic views of preen theory. It's just the process unrolled that way. Okay, so let's move on here.
It is worth mentioning that these subsets of memes may provide a glimpse into the origins of the human brain and its software. It seems likely that storing experiential memes and having genetically endowed programs capable of using them as a basis for generating created memes would have conferred great evolutionary benefits long before humans arose. For example, as Skinner's famous experiment shows, rats that experience electric shocks appear to create memes that result in avoidance in the future.
You guys know of the Skinner experiment? Okay, what it was, um, as I recall, and I probably got it wrong, they gave this, okay, so they put out, they had a bunch of rats in cages, and they put like these nice food dishes, which let's say had cheese in them. And they may have put several of those in each rat's cage. And but being sort of, funny guys, Skinner decided that he would electrify one of those. Okay. So when the rat came to eat at a non-electrified one, he would just get nice cheese. But when he went to eat at the electrified ones, which also had cheese, they'd get this big electric shock that wouldn't kill him, but was presumably quite unpleasant. Okay. And Skinner discovered later that after not too many shocks, the rats stayed away from the electrified bowl. Right? Now, okay. So I think we can see that from that experiment, that this idea of taking experience and processing it to create new memes that then control future behavior was going on long before humans came around. Okay. So and by the way, I think we saw the same things when we had our chimpanzee kind of discussions. Okay. Oh, yes. And so I say here when we discuss non-human. Oh, yeah. So here's another question for you guys. So this brought me back to our chimpanzee or non-human societies discussion. Yes. So here's another question I don't know the answer to.
Discuss in our exploration of non-human societies and whether they have cultural preens, and hence a culture, we spoke of. The need for some members to learn from experience, chimps and rats appear to do that, ants and bees appear to not. The need, for those with mutational power, to pass what is learned on to other members. Are both required? Only one? Are we missing other important things? Examples of non-human societies that have one but not the other? Should we expect that computers will form societies with cultural preens?
Okay. So if you get this question, we thought about the chimp, a non-human society, and we could have also, maybe we did, in fact, we did think about bees, which hang out together and so form a society in some sense. But we were asking whether those societies had cultures, by which we mean cultural preens. And we, as I recall, left it that we thought that chimpanzees had cultures because we thought they had cultural preens, but that those cultural preens were stored in their brains and they arose because the chimpanzee could learn from experience how to build a nest in this particular area and also had the ability to pass that experience down to offspring. Okay. So it left me with the idea that chimpanzees indeed have cultures. When we look at ants, they don't seem to learn from experience, nor do they pass what is learned, because it's nothing, onto other members. Ooh, wait a minute. Hmm. Okay, so ants actually do pass their experiences on, or bees, let's make it bees, on to others. Uh, do you know, isn't that what is done when bees discover a source of nectar or whatever they're discovering, and and they uh, and they come back to the hive and wiggle in a certain way, to indicate to the others? Is anybody still following what I'm mumbling about?
Yes, I think there's one additional thing we talked about, which was memory also, if I recall, seems an important requirement for having uh, cultural prints, right? So the ant didn't seem to have memory. It seemed to behave more like automata, even though they have social interactions, and as a group,
Yes.
they have emergent properties. But the chimp certainly seems to have memory, and that I remember we talking about that difference as well.
Yes, that was part of it, but it seems clear to me with the bee that it does have memory. That is, those workers go out, they find some source of nectar, and they remember wherever they're storing that memory, I'm not sure. They remember enough that when they fly back to the nest, they start that dance, right? So they must have remembered it. And then they pass that information on to other bees. Yes?
But
Okay, so
like,
that seems clear. What they So they learn from experience and they pass what they learned to other members.
but are they
So
able to
I'm not,
communicate that experience though? Like, are
uh,
they
uh,
able
uh,
to?
I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Uh, let's see. Kushal
Yes,
Kalindini.
yes. I was just. I don't think if bees may be able to communicate in the short term, like through some sort of communication through like body, like I guess pheromones and stuff like that, like someone mentioned with ants, but I don't think like long-term culture could be passed down from bees to bees because they don't have like a like necessarily a way to structure memory in like an experience. I think a lot of that is any sort of memory, quote unquote, that's spread from generation to generation for ants and bees, I think is done through genetic information. Um,
I think you're right about being passed from as there is that question of is the culture passed to future generations? I think that's what you're asking. And of course, genes would be a way to, if you have offspring and stuff. And I do think that bees do not pass the where's the good hive information to their offspring. I think that's right. But I do think that just if we ask the question, do bees have memory? Do they learn from experience? Do they pass what they've learned on to others? I think the answer is yes, they do. Now, you're adding another layer to this, Kushal, right? And I don't know where to put that. But uh, so this question of do bees have culture? I think what you're addressing is, are we missing other important things? And you've brought up one that we may be missing. So not sure what to make of that. Okay, Kamran
Yeah,
Revisi. Yes.
easy. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think
Oh,
just to Kushal's point,
Rivu.
I think to a certain level, like you said, they do have memory and stuff like that. But I think it comes down to like the level of consciousness and awareness, I guess, per se. like within these different species, they have like different sorts of ways of interacting with these memories or performing certain kind of functionality or just living in a day to day. So I think it definitely comes down to that. And then in terms of like passing it on to offspring, I think I have to agree with Kushal. Maybe it's more of like a gene thing rather than like a cultural preen idea. Whatever they have is more of like a short term and like a sort of like living sort of like way of passing it down. But in general, like for these species to evolve, it's more of like a genetic variance that like, I guess mutates.
I agree with your intuition, but what it says to me in terms of this question about non-human societies, it leads me to the following, that yeah, well, okay, well, anyway, it leads me to the following, that probably there's no good definition of when a society has a culture, and that we could draw the lines where we're going to say yes and no arbitrarily. We can include having memory, learning from experience, and being able to pass it down as other members as our definition. Or we could say has to be passed down to the next generation. That'd be a different definition. Okay. But it shows me that when we at least get to non-human societies, it's really to some extent, it may be the case that they all have cultures. It's just a question of, how sophisticated we think those are. So yes, I think this discussion reveals something important about what it means to have a culture, and we probably can't define what it means in any other than an arbitrary way. That's my guess.
And like the depth of the culture too, like how deep it goes and like what sort of ways they sort of inherit it too. I think it's all just like dependent on like the species. There's not really like a correct like definitive answer to that.
Yeah, and you've raised the word consciousness, and that is a very controversial sort of issue of what is consciousness, what does it mean, why do we have it, all these things. I addressed that in DTD. My view, of course, is what's addressed. And people seem to think that consciousness, whatever exactly it is special. And I don't think it's special at all. Okay. And I don't think it's I don't think it's mysterious what consciousness is. There's all sorts of questions I'd like answered about consciousness, but it strikes me, and perhaps I'm wrong, that people who discuss and consider issues of consciousness, often there's this notion that it's something magical or metaphysical or something like that. I don't see it, but then that's me. Okay, so, look, I missed my break. Okay, so we won't take a break. We'll go till 3:40. Right? Okay, so John.
Yeah, just a quick comment. So maybe the question as to whether a non-human species has cultural preens or not, maybe that will be a blurry line, like you were saying. But I think there's also the question of when they do have cultural preens, how do these mutate? Is it only through the genetic preens, or can they mutate by themselves? I think that was a more a criteria that maybe is useful as well.
I like that, John, and I haven't considered it Of course, it's novel to me. That might be an important thing to consider. Yes. I'm still, based on our discussions of this issue, led to think that this is where whatever line we draw will be blurry. But I do think your idea of do the cultural preens actually mutate? And in the case of bees, it's hard to say that they're actually mutating. They're just there. And, yeah. Okay, good idea. A lot of good ideas. Must be a potential topic there for a term paper. Okay, so hang on. Let's move on here.
As an aside, you may wonder whether the cultural preens created by humans, including those stored in this article, are true. To find out, see DTD, the gold star of truth.
Okay, so that brings us to the next detour. So we're going to go to DTD, and we're going to go through the chapter, which I've called the gold star of truth. Okay. All right. Any comments or stuff at this point? Okay. So this is the gold star of truth. Excuse me.
Here we will investigate the nature of truth. It turns out that we are not the first to do such an investigation. What we discover will apply not just to truth, but to beauty, bravery, and lots of other things, and will help us understand how human societies work. Figure 38, the gold star of truth. What is truth? Is it true that 1 plus 1 is equal to 2? Is it true that E equals mc squared? Is it true that Jesus was the Son of God?
Okay. So there's three statements. Are they true? Are they not true? Well, we're going to investigate that. Yes? Okay.
Let's start with the easy one. Is it true that 1 plus 1 is equal to 2? What do you think? Let's
Oh, okay. Well, let's go on. What do you think?
What do you think? Let's ask a mathematician. Mathematicians have taken the question of truth very seriously, and after about 2,000 years of effort, they succeeded in the early 1930s in giving a precise mathematical definition. So, a mathematician will apply the definition to 1 plus 1 is equal to 2 and conclude that 1 plus 1 is equal to 2 is true. To be more precise, he should say, according to the definition of truth in mathematics, it is true that 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. What about E equals mc squared?
Okay, what about E equals mc squared? Is it true according to the definition of truth in mathematics? So what do you guys think? Is E equal mc squared true in mathematics?
I think it's a better approximation, but I don't think it's true.
I mean, it's true if, what is it? M equals E over C squared, I guess?
Well,
And C is non-zero.
huh?
Yeah, but how
Right,
do you
yeah,
define
C must be
mass?
non-zero,
Like,
correct.
yeah, but like, how do you define mass? Like, I don't think that all of these things are answered correctly just yet. Like, so I think it's a
We
better.
didn't say anything about mass.
What?
We didn't say anything about mass.
Well, that's what you just said, like in terms of like inverse
No, I
definition.
didn't. We said E equals MC squared.
Yeah,
The
so
whole
it holds
But the
true.
whole point of this exercise is the framework that we're applying truth in. You're applying the scientific framework for truth here, but we were still in mathematical land, right? We just have a bunch of variables. Those variables only have meanings because you're thinking about them through the lens of science.
Like how well are they defined, right?
They're
Like
not defined at all. You've applied like the canonical like
I would say they
interpretation of these
are, but
letters.
I would say they are defined, but they're not carefully defined, and we're like getting closer and closer to like the correct approximation. So like
But
I would say like it's a better approximation
it's an
equal.
equation. You've assumed the meaning of these variables. Those variable like names are arbitrary.
No, I'm saying like that's a better approximation of what's actually happening, like in like empirically observably happening, but like I don't think
Okay. Oh, okay. Oh,
You're
okay.
one step ahead of me.
So I like this this debate, of course. All right, but we are not asking a physicist. We're asking, according to the definition of truth in mathematics, is it true? Okay, we're not asking questions about physics anymore. We're just asking a mathematician, is the statement E equals MC squared true in mathematics? Well, the answer is, I'm going to give this round to Ryan. Okay. But you'll have, okay, because
What about E equals MC squared? Is that true according to the definition of truth in mathematics? To a mathematician, you might just as well ask if it is true that love conquers all. Love has never been, and most probably will never be, defined mathematically, and it is in the nature of the definition of truth in mathematics that truth or falsity can only be applied to concepts that have mathematical definitions. Energy, E, mass, m, and the speed of light, c, are things measured in laboratories and are not defined mathematically. So, the correct thing for a mathematician to say is the definition of truth in mathematics does not apply.
all right. So, okay, I'm having fun. Okay, so and let's do this brief aside. Okay, I guess I have to read this. A brief remark regarding mathematical truth. The definition of truth in mathematics was given by Alfred Tarski in the 1930s. Once mathematically defined, mathematicians could study mathematical truth mathematically, because the definition of truth itself was a mathematical definition. Okay. The results are at the pinnacle of human accomplishment. They are both enlightening and depressing. Okay. Briefly and informally, in 1931, Gödel was able to prove that there is more truth in mathematics than we can ever know. Even worse, excuse me for a second, mathematicians realize that they don't even know what mathematics is. Turns out that there are infinitely many parallel mathematices, a word I made up, okay, called structures, that all deserve to be, quote, the mathematics. But mathematicians can never determine which is the, quote, correct one. Finally, mathematicians are not and provably can never be sure and provably can never, well, wait. Finally, mathematicians are not and provably can never, I think I put the comma in the wrong place, be sure that someday they won't prove 1 + 1 = 3. If that day comes, then everything is true and everything is false. And everything they have ever done is worthless. Given that mathematics is widely considered to have the highest standard of truth of all human endeavors, you have to wonder what you should think when a physicist or a politician says something is true. Okay? I mean, mathematics, mathematicians can prove within mathematics that they can't be sure what mathematics is. And even worse, they can't be sure in the language of mathematics that everything they know is not inconsistent. So it's a pretty dismal state of truth. And that's, the highest level that humans have ever achieved, I would say. Okay. So let's continue with this.
However, if we ask a physicist if E equals mc squared is true, he will say yes. Physicists have a different definition of truth than mathematicians. The physicist's definition is, at least in the popular imagination, something like, it has been demonstrated by numerous experiments. To be precise, the physicist should say, according to the definition of truth in physics, it is true that E equals mc squared.
Okay.
This is how it goes in general. Typically, a society will have a set of cultural preens that determine truth and falsity. I call these preens veracity preens. Different societies have different veracity preens. I like to think of the veracity preens as telling members of the society the rules for placing a silver star of truth or a silver star of falsity on things. So, is it true that Jesus was the Son of God? According to the veracity preens of Judaism, it is false. According to the veracity preens of Christianity, it is true. According to the veracity preens of Islam, it is false. The veracity preens of mathematics do not apply. The veracity preens of physics allow for temporal judgments. Today, they do not determine whether it is true or false, but in the future they might. Surely, a society cannot put silver stars of truth on logically inconsistent statements.
Right? Okay, so let's take all of the silver stars of truth of some society and look where they're placed. And let's ask, can that be a logically inconsistent set of statements? It sure can.
Statements. Well, mathematicians hope that their veracity preens exclude this from happening, but mathematicians, provably, can never be sure that it won't. There are plenty of societies that thrive despite putting silver stars of truth on logically inconsistent statements. For example, Christians are to take the statements in the Gospels as true, even though they appear to be logically inconsistent, for example, regarding the empty tomb. The apparent inconsistency of a monotheistic religion with a trinity at its apex has caused a great deal of turmoil in Christianity, yet it remains the largest of the world's religions.
So, can you think of other examples where a society has logically inconsistent cultural preens? I think that it's quite likely that it's ubiquitous, that many societies have that. I think if we examined American society and took the time, we'd find plenty of examples of logical inconsistency. Okay.
Inconsistency abounds in the preen world. not just within presets, but also between them. Christians assert that Jesus was the Son of God, Muslims say he was not. Communists assert that capitalism is evil. Capitalists say it's the best economic system ever. It is a virtue of preen theory that such inconsistencies do not require resolution. In preen theory, all that matters is which presets are winning and which are losing the battle to survive. Certain other cultural preens are commonly found in societies with veracity preens. There are the absolute truth preens. The absolute truth preens tell members of the society that things with a silver star of truth have a gold star of truth, that is, they are not just true according to the veracity preens of the society, they are true in some absolute transcendental sense.
So, go to any religion, you're told what's true. And from my point of view, you're told to put silver stars on some things. But you're also taught that these aren't just silver stars, they're gold stars. They're really, really true.
Frequently there are proselytized preens that tell members of a society that they have a duty to spread statements with silver stars of truth to people who have yet to be enlightened, whether they seek enlightenment or not.
Right? Okay.
Paradoxically, societies that are logically inconsistent often have the our preen set is not logically inconsistent preen.
Right? You see this a lot. Okay.
This preen is fundamental to the work of some religious apologists and many political speechwriters.
So, the press spokesman for whatever, high government official will be asked a question. Well, you said that we weren't going to do this, or it would be wrong to do this. And now you seem to be saying it would be right to do this. And of course, the political speech writers will find some way of saying, well, no, they seem inconsistent, but really, yeah, this is what happens. Okay.
One finds veracity preens, absolute truth preens, and proselytizer preens in the cultural preensets of many successful societies such as Christianity and Islam. This can lead to conflict. Many Muslims and Christians have fought to the death, driven by just such a constellation of preens. So, do gold stars exist? Are there transcendental absolute truths? Lots of people seem to think so, and many are willing to tell you what they are. Descartes claimed to have found one, cogito ergo sum. But that assertion is at best controversial, and, to my eyes, misses the mark entirely.
And I think we touched on why that's doesn't work for me. Okay.
In preen theory, it really does not matter whether absolute truths exist or not. Humans did not evolve to be truth detectors, they evolved to survive and increase the copy numbers of the genetic preens and other preens they store. Whether absolute truths exist or not, the reality on the ground is that each human acquires their own sets of veracity preens. Different humans can end up believing in different truths and base some of their behavior on those beliefs. See, why do bees kill themselves? This brings us to the question of whether what I have written in this book is true.
Okay. So I think we can all appreciate that whatever I said here doesn't apply to what I'm putting forth as true. Well, of course it does. All right. So
True? Well, it gets no gold star. I am a scientist, and this book is a document produced in accordance with cultural preens of science. There is no great transcendental truth here. If I worked in advertising, I would be selling dog food instead. Figure 39.
So, I'm just selling dog food here. Anyway, I like it. Okay, so since we're going to stop in a few minutes, let's just throw everything open to discussion and see where we're at. All right. So I'll just stop sharing. All right. Any comments or whatever? And now we've gone far enough through this class to, I think, at least be beginning to absorb this different view of how our world works and how societies interact and all of that. Yes, and that was the goal of this course, to give us another view of societies and other processes that go on in our universe. Okay. And, it's not the only view, but I think it's a tenable view, and the view it provides us is useful. Okay. So, any remarks, comments?
Professor, I had a couple of questions on, I was hoping to get kind of just your thoughts on. I don't think they're questions that can be answered.
Okay.
The first is like, does having, I'm trying to really focus around the idea of like logical consistency, because that's kind of breaking my brain there.
Okay.
Um, do you think having any kind of inconsistencies makes a society with a cultural preset weaker in any way, right? Do you think that having inconsistency can be kind of tied directly to like the fragmenting of societies?
Yes, that's a good question, Nathan. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, so that is a good question. The inconsistencies in societies can lead to both, they can be helpful to the society's cultural struggle to survive. For example, a politician who, you know, who has inconsistent views may be able to then appeal to one group of people with one view and another group of people with another view. And even though we may not appreciate that he's two-faced, he might be able to bring societies together, for all I know, right? Because he can speak to both. At the same time, it is certainly true that inconsistencies in the cultural preens of a society can lead to problems. But when I think of that, the examples that come to mind are when there's sub-societies who who have inconsistent views on some things, typically not cultural preens of the grand society. So when I think of the American Civil War, I think that there was a cultural preen set of the I'm not sure I'm right about this. Okay, of America, and then there was a cultural preen set of the South and a cultural preen set of the North. The North and South were inconsistent, in particular about the issue of slavery. But it seems to me that both the North and South subscribe to the major cultural preens of America, that is the Constitution and the like, right? And so it wasn't as if America was inconsistent about slavery. I think there's certainly a lot of stuff in the Constitution about it, so I'm not sure of this. But the actual issues that brought the North and South into conflict were not covered by what was ever in the Constitution. They were additional cultural preens that each the North and the South had acquired, and those were inconsistent. And that did lead to civil war. So I don't know, that's a view I wouldn't, I'm not confident that there's other things to say about it, because maybe certainly are.
I guess, sorry. I
Yeah.
had one more follow-up question I want to get your idea on. Can a society, and I guess what I mean, because society is kind of broad here, I mean, can every member in a society subscribe to a cultural preset that is logically consistent? Or is there like a non-toy example that we can
Wait,
point to and say
where every member of society subscribes to what?
the same kind of cultural preset? Because of the example of like the North and the South, we can say that their presets derive both from America,
Yeah.
but they have accumulated other ones. So I'm just adding that kind of modifier in there. Can a society with all its members subscribing to the same kind of cultural preset, can that cultural preset ever be logically consistent, or like in a non-toy example kind of way?
I, I don't know quite how to. I think all members of society could have memes that they acquired from the society, and those memes can be logically inconsistent. I think every member of society could do that. But there's another phenomena that's kind of interesting, and it's of the same sort. Can it be that every member of society holds in common a preen? I'm going to use preens because okay. But the society as a whole has inconsistent preens. Okay. Which is the question of whether a society is just the sort of union of all of its members, or can the society have a direction of its own? And the answer, I think, is yes, the society can have a direction of its own. So, for example, if we end up in this nuclear war that, at least in theory, could happen, and of course we all hope it never does, that kills all of us, which of us had lost the desire to live? Be some suicidal guy, but okay. But our genetic preens want us to live, and we harbor these preens. Yes. So our genetic preens all want us to live, not because they care about you, of course, but that they will care about themselves. Yet, if we should end up in some, absolutely destructive sort of war, though the societies will have made that decision, we humans as a group, the totality of us, will have taken steps that none of us agree with. That work? Not work? Okay. All right. Well, I'll leave you with that charming thought. Okay. Well, see you next time.